everyone, welcome back to the Support the Spectrum channel. If you are new here, my name is Ryann Sutera. I'm a neurodiversity affirming speech language pathologist and owner of Support the Spectrum. And today we're going to be talking about AuDHD. That is autism and ADHD, both diagnosed together. These two neurotypes often overlap. They can be really complementary to each other, and they can also pose some challenges as well. Many people who are diagnosed autistic are also diagnosed with ADHD and vice versa. But a lot of people with one of the singular diagnoses don't know that they actually have both. So I hope that this video can be validating and affirming if you are suspecting that you may be an ADHDer. A core message that I want to establish from the start is that there is not a singular presentation for AuDHD, and that's because both of these diagnoses exist on a spectrum. We know that autism is autism spectrum disorder and that there are variable different presentations, but that is also true for ADHD. The way that it affects executive functioning differs for everybody. So you might recognize some of the things that we talk about today, or maybe you don't. All perspectives and experiences are valid. So let's start by talking about daily functioning, because this is usually where people start to notice that they do not operate like others do. Many ADHD individuals describe their life as a sort of balancing act, where ADHD pulls their attention to novelty and quick shifts, and autism pulls their attention to predictability, structure, and more sensory anchors or sensory clarity. So a lot of people feel that they are being pulled in two different directions at once. So what this may look like for the person experiencing ADHD is that it looks like they have inconsistent levels of energy, where they want to initiate something and they know exactly what they want to do, but they almost can't do it. And the same with stopping an activity too. From the outside looking in, you might think that this person is kind of all over the place with their energy or their motivation. However, we know that that is truly an executive dysfunction, an example of an executive dysfunction where task initiation or task inhibition is affected. This also can manifest in variable sensory needs, where sometimes they enjoy sensory experiences and crave them, but as soon as that switch turns off, it can become extremely overwhelming. Things like stress, environment, and demand will greatly shift sensory needs of someone with ADHD. This next one is so hard for me to conceptualize, but it's this feeling of being underwhelmed and overwhelmed at the same time. I don't think most people truly know what that feels like. It's taken me a long time through various interview processes with clients that have ADHD for me to truly understand. And please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. The autism side of you tends to self-isolate, tends to want to sit on the couch, watch your favorite things, be in a very sensory deprivation type of environment. So you desire that understimulation, but at the same time, you also are craving to hang out with new friends and do new activities. And you see a video of something that you really think you would enjoy, and you almost want to dive into that activity or hobby right away because you're craving that overstimulation. So you have a strong need for routine that is paired with a strong boredom of routine. These are just some examples. Please share your experience with us. Now let's get into executive functioning. ADHD typically affects brain systems like working memory, initiation, follow-through, and planning due to differing dopamine levels, which we will talk about soon. And autism primarily affects more communication, sensory filtering, change management, and sometimes interpretation of events. So how this looks for someone with ADHD is that they feel really powerful when something is interesting to them. They feel like the smartest person in the room, the most motivated person in the room, and they can really attack challenges with the type of expert energy that things sometimes need. But when it is not interesting to the brain, when it is not giving the brain dopamine, it almost feels inaccessible to do. What do we mean by inaccessible to do? We mean that your brain might know exactly what needs to be done in the exact order, in the exact way, in the exact materials you will need, but since it is not giving you that dopamine rush, it is something that your brain cannot access. It cannot go through those motor pathways. It cannot go through that initiation formulation process because it is not being given the tools to do so. And those tools are largely dopamine rushes or adrenaline rushes. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's responsible for things like interest, reward, motivation, and the feeling of wanting to take action. And what is interesting is that in the brains of those with ADHD, they have a decreased amount of dopamine. There's a lower baseline of dopamine. There's also a less efficient dopamine transport system. And what ADHD brains do in order to supplement energy, motivation, reward is that they use adrenaline. And that is why procrastination is observed in populations with ADHD, because they will use that adrenaline rush that comes with waiting to the last minute to accomplish something in order to be their dopamine source. This is not a choice for people with ADHD. It's neurological. So when ADHD co-occurs with autism, not only are these processes happening, but also processing of perception and need for predictability. So what this looks like in practice is, for some people with ADHD, is that something feels extremely rewarding, motivating when it is predictable, and when it is not predictable, when there's so many variables that are unpredictable, it does not feel rewarding and motivating. In my experience, when individualizing care for my clients who have ADHD, I think that these things contribute to the need for interest-based, low demand, predictable work. So everything that we work on in Support the Spectrum is exactly those fundamentals. We make sure that things are interest-based. We make sure that they are well aware of what to expect in session. And we make sure that there's low pressure environments for learning. Now, in the brains of people who are autistic, there is some research to support that there is less synaptic pruning occurring in the autistic brain. We've talked about this quite a lot on the channel because I do feel like this research is fundamental in understanding and supporting the neurodivergent community, but in post-mortem brain tissue, they found a higher presence of synapses in brains of autistic people. What this means is that less synaptic pruning means that there are more synapses in the autistic brain, which means that processing could take more stops, right? So it's not that processing is necessarily happening slower in all autistic people. Some autistic people do report they feel that it is slower. It might be that they are making more stops in the brain because it's more of a dense, lush forest of synapses rather than a more manicured, let's say, forest like in neurotypical brains. So when we say that there's sensory processing differences, perception differences, social interaction differences in those with autism, it's because we're talking about the fact that they have to go through many more steps to process information. That's why predictability is so important, because when we throw novelty sometimes at an autistic person, it just takes so much longer to process. And like I said in the beginning, this is not everyone's experience with these spectrum-like diagnoses, so please, if you feel differently, share your experience in the comments. It's so important for people to read about this stuff. Okay, so now that we better understand the neurobiology of both of these brains, we're going to talk about how together it affects social interaction. Autistic social communication is really anchored in clarity, predictability, direct communication, deep conversations, and authenticity, honesty. That made it sound like I was gonna say that ADHD are liars. That is not what I'm hinting at. It's just that ADHD people tend to like spontaneity in conversation, rapid shifting, sometimes more emotional based or emotionally intense, I should say. So when these come together, we might see people being highly talkative in certain areas, but pretty quiet in others. We see a ton of masking or camouflaging. If you need to learn more about masking, please check out our video. The link to it will be in the description. There's so much to say about it, which is why there's a whole video on it, but basically leads to burnout. So please educate yourself on that. A lot of AuDHD people report feeling socially disconnected or being out of rhythm with social conversation, struggling to interpret certain things when feeling dysregulated, dysregulated, really wanting connection and needing time to recover from that connection. So I would say if you're someone who has always really craved social interaction but has found it to be challenging, if these things are starting to validate and affirm and light up some light bulbs in your mind, you might want to consider getting one of these or both of these diagnoses. I hope recognizing these patterns can bring a sort of relief to know that your lived experience is true, it's documented, and a lot of other people experience it as well. Now let's talk about how these diagnoses relate to sensory experiences. You might be able to guess based on what we've already discussed about the neurobiology. ADHD people tend to be more sensory seekers because they are trying to stimulate those dopamine stores, whereas people who are autistic sometimes tend to be sensory avoiders because they crave the predictability and management of sensory experiences because, again, they're processing a lot at once. So them together creates a very fluid sensory profile where one day they might love a song, want to play it super loud, and if you tried to do that the next day, it would be a sensory overload situation. Touch can feel really nice when you're craving connection, but if you are not, it can become extremely stressful. You might start off being really stimulated and excited about a busy environment. It might be giving you energy, but then later it can lead to a shutdown. And then food textures and preferences can also shift. People like to say they have a hyperfixation meal. Hyperfixation and hyperfocus tends to be characteristics of ADHD, but maybe over time that starts to fade. And I want to clarify, the variability in these things is not due to inconsistency. It is a result of a dynamic nervous system responding to internal and external variables. I'm going to drive home this point one more time. AuDHD does not manifest in one singular way. That is because of the flexibility and spectrum-like diagnoses that we're talking about. But we're also need to consider that within ADHD, there is also inattentive type ADHD, we have hyperactive ADHD, and combined ADHD, which is a combination of inattentive type and hyperactive type. And then, of course, we have different levels of needed support for autism. What really matters here is understanding your own personal patterns. What are your needs? What are the conditions that make you thrive? If those are things you're still figuring out and you feel like you need help, please reach out to us at Support the Spectrum. This is what we do. We are experts in this field and we have helped thousands of people understand themselves better. We could make hundreds of videos on this topic, but I really want to conclude today with the strengths of someone who has an AuDHD diagnosis. Someone with AuDHD is deeply creative and really good at problem solving. They are authentic. They have intense curiosity. They are dedicated to their interests and passions. They may have a strong sense of justice. And of course, having these two diagnoses provides a unique perspective that most people don't have. And when support is aligned with your neurotype, your personal sense of identity will finally match up with these very apparent strengths. I hope this video helps you feel seen and understood. Again, if you are in need of help, please contact Support the Spectrum. We would love to help you. You are not too much. You are not inconsistent. You are navigating two complex neurotypes at once. Please share this video with those who need it. Leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you in the next video.